Hello, Micah here. Thank you for your patience. If you have sent me any messages or questions, it's been a couple of weeks. I've had bronchitis and I haven't been able to respond to all of them as quickly as I would have liked to. So I really appreciate your patience. I am just now able to get through any kind of conversation without coughing through the whole thing. So I'm going to start with the question. I got a two-part question from one of my viewers, and I'm going to read it so I get it exact. She asks, how do you know that you are an addiction, and could it be for only one person? So the first question, I wasn't clear on how do you know if you're an addiction, as in somebody else's addiction, or how do you know if you are an addict? So I am going to answer both sides of it. So hopefully that answers the question. How do you know that you are an addiction to someone else? Well, usually if somebody is using you based on an addictive tendency, then you're going to be questioning it. Having to ask the question is your first clue. You aren't going to wonder if somebody cares about you and it's not for an addictive tendency or for some unmet need that they have, other than a desire to connect with another human being, because we all have that, and there's nothing wrong or unhealthy about wanting to connect with other people and grow and expand in love and in other ways. But if there's any level of unhealthiness, you're going to know instinctually, and the fact that you even have to question it is going to be your first clue, especially if you're questioning it more than once. I mean, the thought will cross your mind if you've had these patterns in the past, but just having to ask it all is your first clue that you're probably part of an addictive pattern for someone else, or your own addictive pattern, or both. There's going to be a lot of back and forth and push and pull, and those are your first clues. Any more information on that, we'd have to talk a little more one-on-one and go into that a little further. And if you're asking how do you know if you're a love addict, then again, that's a tough one, because the thing that I've learned the most in my, we'll call it recovery process, is how important it is to not label yourself. You can recognize your addictive tendencies and addictive patterns, because I don't know of very many Americans who don't have them and how it manifests in different ways. I just happen to be one of those people that it manifested in my relationship dynamics with the opposite sex. It didn't really show up in my parent-child role. I didn't have the addictive tendencies raising my child, although that is common also, and people don't realize it. But if you recognize that you have an addictive tendency, you again are going to notice the push and pull. You aren't going to find full fulfillment out of your relationships, and you're going to constantly be in want, and you're going to experience a lot of extremes, extreme highs and lows. And again, this is a question where specifically it would be best to talk one-on-one with someone to kind of break down what the tendencies are and work more around the tendency or the unhealthy pattern that keeps showing up, and recognize that, and then look for alternatives as opposed to changing or shifting the pattern, looking at alternative responses, because that's really not judging yourself, not judging the patterns, but just recognizing that they're there and then looking for alternative ways is really the best way to work through that. And the last part of the question was, could it be for one person? Well, from experience, I can tell you that you may fixate on one person. I fixated more on one person than I did anybody else throughout my entire life, because they kind of became this strange idealization of what I imagined my life could be. I kind of fixated on them and idealized them. And then when they wouldn't live up to that expectation, then there was conflict, disappointment, or stonewalling, ghosting, all of those messed up patterns would show up. And I was equally, if not more so, guilty of them. So if you have a lot of expectations on someone, the more expectations you have on an individual, the more your addictive patterns are beginning to show up. Something is unmet within you, and you're looking at that other person to fulfill that unmet need. So yes, you can experience those patterns with other people, though. What I learned through other relationships after I started recognizing my patterns was when that pattern would show up and I would be in a relationship, what were my alternatives? And at the time I had a partner who was really good at helping me work through those, and he was also willing to look at his avoidant patterns. So we could have a really important and strong dialogue around that without any expectations attached to how our relationship would end up. But really we were there for each other at the right time to help us recognize our unhealthy patterns in ourselves and have that reflected back to us. So, but again, I can say with absolute certainty that any long-term relationship I had had in the past, there was one of those addictive type tendencies that begins with an expectation. So if you have an expectation, and I don't mean expecting someone to respect you, it's fair and right to expect to be treated in a healthy way and in a loving, compassionate way. But I mean expectations as in you have this image in your mind, this fantasy, this idea of how things should feel or how things should play out or how things should work, and you're not open to just accepting how they are. And you get uncomfortable just being present in the relationship, and you start to maybe obsess or overthink or expect this person to make you feel a certain way. And if you're not feeling that certain way all the time, then you think something is wrong and you try to sabotage it. So I could tell you that you will probably always notice those patterns, but as you work on the patterns and just noticing them without judgment, then you can look at alternatives. And you can also, what I do is I just step back a little bit and make sure that I'm not like, what is it that I'm feeling? What's making me uncomfortable? Why does my body feel this way? Why do I have anxiety? And what is it that I need to do for me in order to not have that awful feeling anymore? And then project it onto someone that I really care about or am really interested in and expect them to take care of it. I have to take care of it for me. It's not their job. I just want to be in the space of love, and I want to share that with someone without expecting them to make me feel a certain way. So when they accidentally make me feel amazing, then it's just a bonus. And yeah, it makes it really worth it. So again, these questions, more details, we got to really get one-on-one with them. But I will tell you that I'm going to start doing a series of going more in depth of the different types of love and how they show up in your life, and how getting to know the different types of love and really fostering those types of love will pull you out of the eros and mania aspects that are the ones that tend to be skewed quite a bit in our culture. And then it makes us have these expectations and project those onto our relationships. And then when our relationships don't live up to this expectation or this idea, this fantasy we've created in our mind, then we're unhappy and we go into addictive patterns in other aspects of life. And if we focus on the other types of love, that was the thing that pulled me out of it the most. So I am going to get into more depth on that topic individually of each individual type of love that I discussed in previous videos in the future. So keep the questions coming. Thank you for being patient in my responses, and stay tuned.